IVM.
IVM Likes is an IVM production, and if you like cool, nerdy discussions about pop culture and more, then do check out Geek Fruit. It's where all the nerds of the town come together and they sit and chat about sci-fi, comic books, and TV shows and movies. It's a whole lot of fun. So do check out Geek Fruit on the IVM podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hello and welcome to IVM Likes. Hi, I'm Navin and with me in the studio we have a fun new roster. We haven't had this combination because one of us is literally coming to the studio for the first time.
That's true.
That's Jaanam's voice you're hearing. That said, her name is Jaanam. Let's clear that once and for all.
It's not Janvi.
It's not Janvi. It's not Janam.
And Jaanam is also not my nickname.
That's a real name.
It's a real name.
And many songs have been sung in the bargain.
Too many.
Also with us we have Amit Doshi.
Hello.
And the founder and father figure for all of us at IVM.
Father figure. Man.
And today, before we go on to our discussion round, we'll have a quick round of recommendation. Today we're discussing a podcast, a documentary series, and a book. So, Amit, you want to go first?
Sure. I wanted to tell everybody about this podcast called Coverville.
Okay.
Coverville is actually one of the oldest podcasts around. It's been continuously being made since 2004. So it's been around forever. It's a really interesting idea. So what they do is... it's a music podcast. You can listen to different songs on it. But what they do is they'll look at an artist. For example, they'll have an artist like Tom Petty or Dave Matthews Band or Jimi Hendrix, I think, is the latest episode. U2 is there. And what they'll do is they'll have various different people do covers of those guys. So you'll have you'll have a Johnny Cash cover of Tom Petty.
Oh, nice.
Or you'll have a Stevie Nicks cover of Tom Petty. Or you'll have a Green Day cover of Tom Petty. Or you'll have all these kinds of different genres, people coming at them and doing that. And then they'll also do a couple of songs where Tom Petty is covering somebody else as part of the same episode. So each episode is about 8 to 10 songs, kind of this. It's about an hour long or so. And it's a ton of fun to listen to. You get to hear a whole bunch. It's the first place I ever heard the Johnny Cash version of Hurt. On this podcast.
Which became the trailer music for Logan.
For everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mainly Logan, which used it very well.
Logan? Actually, I remember it best from Person of Interest. My first recommendation way back when. But yeah, I mean, they did a fantastic sequence. It's a song which is very cinematic, right?
Yeah.
That Johnny Cash's voice and that really slow dirge kind of thing.
Yeah.
It really works well. But I think it's a really fun podcast. They have a lot of different artists that they've covered across pop, rock, country,
so these are all
R&B.
Existing artists who have already been in the scene, or
yeah. So they're mostly well-known people who are. So the person whose episode it is mostly well-known.
Okay.
The guys who are doing covers, they have different degrees of how well you know them, right?
Correct.
Some of them will be fairly popular, like for example, Johnny Cash doing Tom Petty or Stevie Nicks doing Tom Petty. Some of them will not be so well known, right? I mean, they'll be if they were well-known bands, I probably would not.
Arctic Monkeys and
Arctic
Imagine Dragons.
Well, so I mean, that's actually, those are pretty well-known. I mean, we're talking about even more obscure, right? I'll read out the names of the guys covering the Jimi Hendrix one that just went out today. Robin Ford, who I've heard of. The King, who I have not. Saneh Salmonsen. Not heard of her.
Quite an alliteration.
Yes, I have not heard of her. Hazy Dreams, the Ann Wilson Thing, Jackie Taylor. None of these I've heard of, right?
Yeah.
Then you have Patti Smith and Sting, who you have obviously heard of, right? Godfrey Daniel, haven't heard of them. Rara Avis, I kind of heard of them, but I don't think many people would have. Becky Bondage, who I've never heard of. Another alliteration. Becky Bondage, yeah. Spin Doctors, who I've heard of.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a variety. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Joan Jett. So I mean,
they have
just
1 hour of this.
It's just 1 hour of Tom Petty covers.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and then there'll be 2 songs which Tom Petty is covering of somebody else.
So there's nothing talking at all in.
Well, no, so I mean, it's hosted by a guy. It's hosted by this guy called Brian Ibbott, I think. And so he does it in a DJ style kind of this, right? He's telling you a little bit about the band that is coming up, a little bit about the history, and then he just runs into the song.
Nice.
But it's a music podcast, right? I mean, if it's an hour long, out of that hour, I would say probably 54 minutes are music.
Makes sense because it's about music.
It's about music.
It's called Coverville.
Coverville, yeah, it's a fun podcast. Check it out.
All right, I'll go next. I'm also recommending something music related, but this is a documentary series on Netflix called Hip Hop Evolution. It's a 4-parter and essentially goes to the very roots of where hip hop began and like where in history can we put a proper marker point saying that this is where East Coast rappers were born, and this is where like now it went, and how West Coast happened, and all the so basically East Coast was where New York was, and they were mostly rapping about poverty, and they were rapping about being the coolest people in the neighborhood and being fly, and they had colors and they had different outfits, and it was mostly like just like a funk offbeat as hip hop. And so they basically go back to this guy called DJ Kool Herc, who used to have like block parties in his house and get speakers and start sampling stuff, but which nobody did back then. So with every rap band or rap group they introduced what they added to that kind of genre, and also while watching it you find that a lot of people hate each other, like in any scene coming up. They were like, see, Run DMC were punks, they were fakers, and somebody else like Sugar Daddy was whatever, and also like they all like calling each other out, but they also where respect is due, they give the credit and they really like respect those
if
people.
anybody calls Run DMC punks, then I don't think they're giving due respect, man.
No, because they're talking about the commercialization of it.
But of course, I mean,
like that is a personal DJ opinion, right? We for example, when Adidas was not even like looking out for black rappers to represent their brand, they were wearing Adidas, and they wrote a song called My Adidas, which they sang at a concert and called the representative from Adidas to come. So they got a brand deal out of that, which was obnoxious in its own way, but also like for them to be ballsy enough to do that. So it's like you get different perspectives on that.
There was no money in hip hop back then, right? So I mean, like any way you can to kind of figure out ways to make money doing this, because you want to do this, right? And I mean, like for certain artists, I think part of their obligation is trying to make sure that they can continue to do it, right? I mean, like it shouldn't be something that you can do once and then not be able to sustain it, right? If you want to develop an art form, you need to put money behind it so that people can make careers doing it.
Yeah, so you go into like lives of these people, like you learn about Ice-T, who was not even actually a gangbanger back then, but he was the first one from the West Coast to start rapping about like guns and violence, and gangster rap became a thing. He was not even calling it gangster rap back then, and he was basically one of those affiliates, where he was one of those like, if you look at a rap gang group, then he would be one of those jesters in the group who would write and rap for them to keep them happy. So he doesn't get gang banged sometime, on the streets. So that's how he used that to make his life story. And then we learn about the NWA and how Dr. Dre came about. So a very detailed look at it, and it's very stylistically done as well. Like every time, because you have to remember so many names, there's so many rappers and DJs introduced, they do a very nice colorized an animated version of that, and as soon as they come in, the song they have ever sampled or played, it plays in the background. So you have like this visual and auditory coming together of senses, and then you remember them better. So I never learned a lot of these names in the start because I never knew. My introduction was Busta Rhymes and so forth.
Well, that's that's a little older, right?
But still, like I go back in time, like again Dr. Dre. Then we listen to Eminem a lot, and now we listen to other bands and other singers. But to look back at a time where there was no rap and it was like a big bang of music, and then like everybody's now doing it.
So have you seen the Defiant Ones?
No.
That's the one with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine.
I've heard about this one.
No, so okay. I was just wondering. I mean, like, if you've seen that, then can you compare and contrast? But I guess if not,
I'll check it out next time. We'll probably do a comparative study. So the guy who's doing it, he's also a rapper, and he's done the opening song. The opening theme itself is so cool. Fall in love with the documentary by that only.
So has he also interviewed any recent artists, or it's just looking back at their lives?
It stops at Dr. Dre, and then after that, like basically, you meet Ice Cube, because Ice Cube was there when the West Coast rappers were coming up, and you learn about his perspective on it. And he was like, when back in the NWA days when we were like all trying to stay out of trouble, Dre would go out and like get warrants against him and like go and with the police. So it was much difficult for us to operate back then. Like Easy, he was an actual gangster. He was a gun-toting gangbanger. So the cops were always after him. So like you kind of like have to laugh in perspective. Because he made it, right? Ice Cube made it.
Ice Cube made it, I mean, like all NWA guys made it, right? I mean, like that was, they did as much as you could possibly do at that time.
That time,
Yeah. Cool.
So cool. It's called Hip Hop Evolution. Check it out.
Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
So now, Jaanam.
You have a book for us.
Tell us.
Yeah. So the book I'm recommending it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F***. It's by this guy called Mark Manson.
Okay.
So it's a self-help book, but it's not your regular, The Secret, Law of Attraction, all of that. It cuts out all of that bullshit, and it's more in your face like a bitter medicine all of us are supposed to swallow and accept about life. And so it's not, none of it is sugar coated. Whatever's
Okay.
written in the book, nothing is sugar coated. So I was listening to Akash's podcast with Cyrus,
Okay.
where he was saying, kids should not be told sugar coated things in school. So this
Right.
is, I feel these kind of books, although like it has abusive terms and all, like and all, but these are the kind of books that should be taught in school, because you're growing up with, like, when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I can't wait to grow up. I can't wait to be an adult and do all these adulty things. And when you hit each adulthood, you're just like, what the hell is going on? So
It's like a nice crash course towards getting ready for life, you mean?
yeah, and also most of us, like, generally we stress out about things and we get anxious about things that we're not supposed to be giving a about. So the title itself says the subtle art of not giving a it means you're not supposed to not give a shit about anything at all, but you deserve the number of shits you give for
Certain
things
Right.
things that actually matter.
Cool.
Interesting. So is it like a humorous kind of take on things, or is it more like philosophical, or how would you describe it?
So the language which he's used and the stories he's narrated is presented in a humorous way,
Okay.
but overall I wouldn't say it's humorous. You're reading the book and you reflect back on your life, and you reflect back on the choices you've made.
Right.
And you're like, oh my God, you've been wrong about so many things in the past. And it talks about how we as humans collectively are so wrong about a lot of things, and we will continue to be wrong.
Right.
But it's just that in the future, what we do next will be maybe less wrong. The generation to come will be less wrong than the previous
Because we
generation.
generally give less of
Yeah.
Guys, we gotta beep
Exactly.
this shit, man.
Janam's first appearance on this podcast is tainted with
I was using a lot of beeps on the show.
There will be some beeps.
Yep.
That's alright.
Yeah, that's okay. People like the beeps.
We
They know.
we might let one go because we don't give. In
No, we
hindsight.
don't. We do give.
Oh, we do.
We do. We give
We're on
very
a tight
much. We
ship
do.
here.
Yes, we do.
All right. So that's the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fudge. Just to like.
There you go.
Yes.
That's the right word.
That's the right way to put it.
That's the
Yes.
right word.
Cool. So we'll take a small break now, and let's do a roundup of the recommendation.
Sure.
So to round up the recommendation, Amit suggested.
I suggested the podcast cover will.
Okay, I recommended the documentary series Hip Hop Evolution and Jaanam.
I recommended The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fudge by Mark Manson.
Not quite the name, but you'll find it on Google. We'll take a
If you,
small break.
you put in the FU, I think it'll autocomplete correctly.
Yeah. Let's go with the FU.
Yep.
So we'll take a small break now and be back now with our discussion round.
Hello, I'm Sanjeev,
And I'm Tushar.
and this is the Rotomouth Podcast, a weekly show where we talk about motors and motoring in India. Cars, bikes, rickshaws, buses, friends, familiars, and time pass.
Find us every week on the IVM podcast app or any other app you might use. Stuck in traffic? Put on Rotomouth. Taking a while in the loo? Rotomouth is there for you.
Dude, that sounded particularly disgusting.
Thank you. But seriously, catch Rotomouth every week.
Hello and welcome back to IVM Likes. We are here despite the cyclone that's blistering outside. Not very blistering. It's not as worse as the south of India has got it. Cyclone Okhi is here.
Okhi,
I'm still
okay.
learning
I
the
heard
months.
it's past Bombay now.
Yeah, it's
so-
moving
Yeah,
towards
it
Gujarat.
veered away. That's what I was told.
Yeah. So as of now, like a lot of SOS alerts went out. Like Google was constantly warning us from 2 days ago, so we all knew we had to be a little ready for this. And that brings us to the idea that maybe now disaster films will make more sense, right? With every passing day, as in because already America was hit very badly this year. The whole of Texas was underwater, and
Texas, and there were two cyclones, huh?
Yeah.
One was in Texas, I think one was in Florida.
Yeah, there was one in Florida as well.
There were two typhoons, I think.
And
Or
still
hurricanes.
Geostorm, a movie by Roland Emmerich, with starring Gerard Butler, flopped in the movies. And you got to wonder now because this guy has been making movies about disaster from like the 90s,
Right.
and he's been very consistent about it. And we enjoyed that fare for a while, and
Well,
then we got bored of it.
I think some of it is it's the gestalt of the culture just generally, right? I mean, like in the 90s, global warming was still new. We
Yeah.
didn't really understand what's involved in it, what's going to happen with it, right? So you saw a lot of movies like that happen at that point in time, right? Also, So I mean, like you saw a bunch of things like Twister, and you saw like all the Emmerich movies, like 2012 and not 2012. Sorry, The Day After Tomorrow. And
there was a Volcano also.
The Volcano one, there were two. No, there are always two, right? There's Dante's Peak and Volcano. Then there is Armageddon and Deep Impact. So there are always two. It's never just one.
Correct.
But I mean, but again, these I guess are disaster movies as well. But I mean, like, I think Emmerich's stick is like this whole global warming thing, right?
Yeah, and taken to the extreme as well. Like even if somebody wanted to believe in global warming at one point,
no, but it doesn't do service to that argument.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying.
So basically, like if you want to like have a proper impactful conversation about global warming, you have to be like, oh no, like it still starts slowly with the sea levels rising, and it's not like the Statue of Liberty is going to come flipping over to your village and destroy your house.
Yeah, that was such a bad movie, man.
Yeah,
I mean, like seriously, such a bad movie. In the course of 48 hours, the entire world froze. I mean, that was just like, man, come on. I mean,
but like when I was a kid, I was like, this is very beautiful, like to watch, and very enchanting also, because London is filled with water. There's this boat that pulls in. There's wolves, and they have to fight the wolves, and they have to burn books, and I felt so bad for that. So it like,
so it had the makings of a good movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't one though.
So yeah, exactly. So I think he has this this rare habit of like the rare skill rather to be able to attract you with what he's trying to portray.
Right.
Like even with 2012, it's like the whole world is falling apart. There's the ground breaking behind the car of the protagonist and his family driving away from everything falling. Like there's cliffs and there's buildings, and he's driving through that. And you know it's obnoxious. You know it's terrible, and you would never have to deal with that in real life. But it's fun to see.
It is. So he's a good idea guy.
Yeah.
Right? He's a not so great movie maker.
Correct.
But like, that overall idea, the idea of what would happen if global warming got accelerated to a ridiculous degree and people had to deal with no technology and stuff like that. That's an interesting idea, right? But the way that movie just was made was just like, no, man. And I mean, like, he does that with other things. Like the Godzilla movie that he made, right? That wasn't a bad idea of what a Godzilla movie should be. It was just so cartoonish that it did not really kind of do anything.
There's so much lore behind that already. Have you seen the Godzilla movie, the 99 one?
The one with Matthew Broderick?
I watched it when I was...
Oh, I'm sure there's no way that you could have missed that movie. It was on television, like constantly.
Have you seen a new Godzilla?
No, I haven't
that
seen
one was really
one.
good.
Yeah.
The one with Bryan Cranston, right?
Yeah,
that one was really good.
They're trying to build on the whole dark universe as well.
Yeah.
So, on the other hand, also we have Michael Bay, who's also very closely doing movies that, like, are about world extinction, but it's through some robot or some, like, some
or
other...
even the meteor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, he did do the Armageddon.
Correct.
Yeah.
But there was one movie he made called Pain and Gain, which was very unlike him. It was based on this real life story of a guy who was like, two guys were trying to, like, swindle people into, giving them money.
Okay.
So it's basically Rock, it's Mark Wahlberg and Anthony Mackie.
Oh, okay.
It's a very fun fare, but then that's very unlike Michael Bay.
Yeah, that's not a Michael Bay movie. That's not what you think of. When you think of Michael Bay, you're thinking big explosions and like fast cars and...
But is that still a believable realm for you? Like, unlike Roland Emmerich now, we have... Michael Bay, who puts all these things in a world where we can have alien robots.
It's pure fantasy, right? So pure fantasy works. I mean, like, the problem is when you try and make realistic things unrealistic, right? That's where you lose your suspension of disbelief, right? But in a fantasy movie, you're all in, right? You just expect it to be like magic and dragons and like all kinds of wacky shit happening. And I mean, like, for that, I don't really have any kind of... I can watch any of those. I love watching those things. I mean, that's what I watch most of the time anyway.
Cool. Let's ask Jaanam what she's watched. We're just like staring at our faces for a minute.
So I mean, when you mentioned the 2012 that scene, that's actually the only scene I do remember, and I have watched Day After Tomorrow. So I haven't watched too many disaster movies, but I have to say I do, like, the dreams I have at night are like full-fledged disaster movies, like the actual scenes from...
Tell us one scene so Roland Emmerich can listen to this and pick up and make a new movie.
I've actually considered waking up from my dream and writing it down, writing what I saw, because it will make like a beautiful script. Okay. I've narrated these dreams to like a lot of friends, and they're like, you should seriously pen it down.
What's the most terrifying thing that you can remember?
There's lots actually. So there was this one dream where I'm in a city which is full of... the city comprises of every city I've ever visited. So there's Paris, there's Kasol. There's like every place I've ever visited is in one.
Okay.
And I am like running with like a couple of friends or something. I'm running from one place to another, and everything is falling apart, and I'm trying to like save the city. And also like there are terrorists who've planted bombs at different places. So apart from the natural disasters that are happening, there's people terrorizing the cities. And I'm trying to find, and like the terrorists, they've left clues everywhere. So you have to find those clues, decode them or something, and only if you do that, you're able to defuse the bomb.
Okay, so you've got terrorists. You've got like Da Vinci Code style puzzle solving. You've got natural disasters happening. You've got a buddy movie because you got friends working with you.
Clue hunt.
You have a lot going on here.
And plus you have like Kasol and Paris right there.
Yeah.
So you can smoke the Kasol Mahal and have croissant in Paris.
And all these dreams I've had sober, by the way. I wasn't
inebriated.
Cool. In any way. Yeah.
Nice. So do write these scripts, man. I think we'll sell these like hotcakes.
Sure.
And so I was going to talk about the other spectrum where we have movies like Sharknado.
Okay.
Because say like Roland takes himself very seriously.
Right.
Michael Bay takes himself very seriously. Even though they're working with fantasy over here. But Sharknado is like they know they're making fun of the genre.
Right.
And still it's got like all these cringe elements.
I love the trash, man.
Yeah, I love
trash, man. This kind of trashy stuff just works so. It's so much fun to watch, right? I mean, like Sharknado. Then there's the.
Wait, do you know what Sharknado is? It's exactly what it sounds like.
It's
sharks
shark
in a tornado.
Yeah,
that's it.
So sharks spinning in a tornado.
Yeah, and they come and eat you while flying.
But I like the trash version. So Sharknado is meta trash, right? I mean, like it's clearly nonsensical, right? But I even like trash like Anaconda.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, that's not a true disaster movie, but it kind of is, right? I mean, like, but I even like trash like that, where you got, like, this 500-foot square snake who's trying to kill everybody.
Yeah.
I enjoy that kind of stuff, man.
Did you see all the movies of Anaconda?
No, I saw one.
There was one more afterwards. The Blood Orchid karke.
Okay.
It's very scary.
This Sharknado reminds me of some Piranha movie I had seen.
Oh, but Piranha 3D?
Piranha 3D, yeah.
No, sorry, Piranha 3 Double D. I'm sorry. That's what the movie was called. I'm not joking. That's what the movie was called.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because you see double D's on screen.
Yeah.
For real.
Yeah.
Okay.
But piranhas and boobs.
Yeah.
That's one of the USPs.
Pretty much, that's what the movie was. And if
yeah.
you want to watch piranhas and boobs, go watch this movie. That's what that movie was.
So, but what about like cabin disaster movies? Like Cabin in the Woods is a great example of like they blending world and along with like
Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
So I like that. So that's actually, again, that's another genre. That's not really
a disaster film,
right?
But here the stakes are the world's end.
But it's also like, it's similar in many ways to like something like The Truman Show, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like it's that voyeurism along with that kind of stuff.
Correct,
so I mean, like, it's got all of those elements built into it.
That's a great movie.
I like that movie. That was a great movie.
Not enough people have watched the movie, and I have a massive grudge against that. Have you watched Cabin in the Woods?
No.
See?
Okay.
Only the few.
Okay.
That's okay. Have you watched Olympus Has Fallen? What do you think about
Actually,
that?
we should think about what a disaster movie is, right? Is a disaster movie where the earth is out to screw humanity, or is a disaster movie where the earth is in peril, or is a disaster movie something where all kinds of bad shit goes down? I mean, like, what is a disaster movie?
I think, all kind of bad shit going down.
So then, I mean, like, Olympus Has Fallen classifies as a disaster movie? It's just one building.
Yeah, but then, like, once they get White House, they can control everything else. That's the whole idea they're trying to portray, right?
But I mean, like, that's any political thriller, right? That once you get access to the nuclear codes, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, but then, like, that's what, so that gives you, like, a edge, no? Like, once you want to
No, I get that.
launch bombs on people.
Do you think that should qualify as a disaster movie, though?
I think so.
Really?
I mean, like, not in the world, like, suing you kind of way.
Yeah, I think that, a disaster movie is like, I mean, like, world in peril, yeah, but world in peril, like, through direct means, right? Rather than, like, taking over the bombs and trying to blow up the world. I feel like that is, if you go to that degree, then even a Trump documentary is a disaster movie, right?
It's a disaster in the making movie.
Yeah, no, but it's a disaster movie because you've given the nuclear codes to a whack job. So...
That's true.
So I think you mean more of mass destruction kind of.
Yeah, I think like there needs to be imminent danger, right? I mean, like you need to be trying to save the world from it being blown up right now.
Correct.
Otherwise, the pacing also doesn't work. Like one of the things about disaster movies is people running around like headless chickens.
There has to be a trade-off.
Yeah, so I mean,
there has to be a shot of every city in the world that's getting destroyed, and you have the landmarks getting destroyed.
Of course.
In India's Taj Mahal.
Yes.
Only Taj Mahal gets destroyed.
Yes.
Nothing else. Which right now in India they'd be happy about. They'd be like, oh, now we can build a mandir over there.
Didn't they do something with that? What happened? Wasn't there some controversy over the Taj Mahal getting blown up or not getting blown up or something like that?
In some movie recently.
Yeah, some movie they decided not to blow up the Taj Mahal because they didn't want to insult people from India, and people got insulted about the fact that they didn't blow them up.
Make your mind filmmakers. Yeah. But what else would they blow up? But yeah, I think I get your point that once you see something visibly blowing up and like people dying.
Yeah, I think the disaster movies generally work at a really frantic pace, right? And if you're talking about something like Olympus Has Fallen, right?
Correct.
I don't know if that has the same sense of urgency where the world is about to blow up as something like, crappy as it may be, something like The Day After Tomorrow, right? Where the world looks like it legitimately is going to be no longer existing in a few days. So I think there is a difference between those two categories, if you will. Though I don't know how you would classify them correctly or this, but I do think there's a difference.
Yeah, there is an obvious difference, but I think what happens sometimes is they get bunched very closely together.
Yeah.
Or it's a trailer packaging usually that sells you the idea that, once this guy is in a helicopter, it's going to blow everything up. So that kind of stuff.
But I think big action is always packaged the same way, right? Whether it is something like this or even a Die Hard.
Yeah.
That packaging for how the trailers work is almost always in that same genre, same vein.
Now, the only recent disaster movie that made shitloads of money was San Andreas.
Yeah.
Because it had The Rock fighting the earthquake. I mean, how cool is that?
Exactly. You put The Rock in anything, people watch it, man.
He'll fight anything.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, Jumanji is coming out, which
really?
This is a part 2 of it. And it's not a physical game now, it's a video game in which 4 guys get sucked inside.
Okay.
And now they are in the Jumanji jungle realm. And they have to survive as these video game characters.
That sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting as a pitch. But it's got Kevin Hart.
I'm not sure how it will turn out though.
I know, because I have way too many fond memories of the original Jumanji.
Do you guys know that Jumanji was a massive flop?
Back when it came out,
it was a massive flop.
It was a major disaster. Yeah.
Major disaster. And since then, it's been everybody loves it now.
Yeah.
But back then, it was a major, major disaster. But Kevin Hart.
Yeah,
the new
Kevin
one.
Hart, Rock, and Carey Mulligan, I think. No, Karen Gillan, sorry, not Carey Mulligan.
Oh, Karen Gillan. So she's the Doctor Who chick, man.
Yeah, Karen Gillan, who's also Nebula in
Yeah.
And Jack Black. I think it's a solid cast that way.
That is good. Jack Black's always fun, man.
Yeah, he's always solid.
Yeah. I enjoy almost everything I've ever seen him in.
Last team-up movie I enjoyed of his was Tropic Thunder.
That was a good movie.
It's a great movie.
But my favorite for Jack Black, it has nothing to do with disaster movies, but I love School of Rock.
Yeah, man.
I've seen that movie probably 30 times.
It's the best.
I love that movie.
So now, let's end this.
Yes.
We did not quite define what disaster movies are.
No, we did not.
So tell us, as listeners, what do you think defines a proper disaster movie for you? Do you still watch Roland Emmerich movies? Does anybody anymore? But should he stop or should he continue making movies?
Yeah, he should continue.
He should continue.
Yeah,
at least until Trump watches them and says global warming is real. I think he should go on. Thank you guys for joining us on the table today. Thank you, Jaanam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amit.
All right.
And this is IVM Likes. You can find us online, ivmpodcast.com, and talk to us. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out IVM Podcasts to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.